Alright, stop me if you heard this one. The reason why a lot of anime protagonists are boring or uninteresting is due to their simple design and lack of special features or qualities. You've probably heard this more simply said like this: all of these damn characters look the same!
They're the same picture.
There's obviously a lot of truth to that. Most mainstream protagonists in the media of manga and anime tend to be this type of otherworldly beings, capable of great impactful feats in their stories and in the worlds they reside. These quote-unquote boring protagonists, however, are mostly used as vessels for us viewers to better immerse ourselves in their fantastical worlds. Most of us wouldn't be considered protagonist material. So we're initially just like them, relatable yet unremarkable. And this isn't diss to anyone who likes these self-insert shows. I myself am nothing special. You're seeing a slightly more interesting cartoony version of me, and that's by choice, because I essentially looked like the love child of Moist Critical and Asmongold.
They're the same picture.
Having all that said, however, that is why when I started reading BLUELOCK, and later then watching the anime adaptation, I became fascinated by its main character, Isagi Yoichi, and at just how unremarkable he looks. And yet, that is the perfect design for him as a character. He is not interesting. That is, of course, only at first glance. But first, just letting you know, I'm spoiling some of the anime and later parts of the manga for this. You don't like that? Go watch/read it and come back quickly. I'm not waiting for you, the rest of the class will be ahead of you for the rest of the year. Alrighty then. The year is 2018. The Japanese national team finished 16th in the FIFA World Cup. Not being quite happy with the results, the Japan Football Association hires this creep, Eigo Jinpachi, with most members reluctantly agreeing to his master plan to lead Japan to stardom, BLUELOCK, a training regimen designed to create the world's greatest egotistical striker. And so Yoichi Isagi is one of 300 players invited for the program. He decides to join even after being nagged on by budget gender band Edna from The Incredibles. There's one catch to BLUELOCK, however, and that is that those who fail BLUELOCK will never again be permitted to play or represent for any Japanese team. Making this a PG-13 football cross Squid Game anime setup you never knew you wanted until it was presented to you. Now that we got the brief summary out of the way, we can get to the why Isagi doesn't seem much like main character material part. And to do that, a little intro to its character. Yoichi Isagi has always loved football, ever since he was little, especially looking up to Noel Noah, the world's greatest football player. And so Isagi aspires to be just as great as him, alongside his dream of leading Japan to win the World Cup someday. Yep, that's about it. BLUELOCK doesn't pull you in with the main character's backstory or personality, but with a fun enough premise, it honestly doesn't have to. Isagi is very much presented to you as your typical high schooler with an interest for sports. He's not that special, and he's an okay football player at best, considering that he's at the bottom of BLUELOCK at the beginning of the story. I want you to think about any other anime main character. How do we visualize them? Figure out who they are. Those are the main questions to answer when designing a character. A good character design speaks to the character's identity. Characters aren't striking for the sake of being striking, and in the case they are, it's painfully obvious that there's no real thought behind the character itself. Now, before I tell you what saves Isagi from ending up in the garbage can of forgettable characters, I'd like to show you the moment he meets his competition at BLUELOCK for the first time. I think the anime does a better job with this scene than its manga counterpart, on the account of adding short shots of future characters. But the thing you notice right away is just how much more visually striking these characters feel as opposed to Isagi. If BLUELOCK were written in the typical shonen form of "this guy's insane and I must survive this crazy program with the power of friendship and determination," there are quite a few characters who I believe would fit the MC spot perfectly. Daisuke Kunigami wants to be the football equivalent of a superhero. Meguru Pachira wants to play against rivals who can compete with him and his monster. Yeah, I also thought it was a bit weird, but I love this good boy anyways. Yoma Chigiri wants to unchain himself past his injury drama to play football wholeheartedly again. As you can see, there are many other characters far more interesting for the MC spot than Isagi. But I think first and most obviously, someone who fits this criteria, although probably no one thinks about, is Ryosuke Kira. Yeah, hear me out. Kira is introduced at the beginning of BLUELOCK alongside Isagi, beating Isagi's team, allowing his to go to the nationals, and crushing poor Isagi's dream in the process. He too is invited to the BLUELOCK program, but unlike Isagi, Kira emanates a radiance that could only be described as the pure hard-working boy. A genuinely good guy, he is disgusted at Ego's entire philosophy on egoism, seeing football as a team game where every player is just as bit as important as the striker. He wants to prove Ego wrong by finding a way of beating BLUELOCK the righteous way, the correct way. Which it doesn't. Though you see, for as much as I've been antagonizing the default anime character design of Yoichi Isagi, it doesn't take more than an episode or 2 chapters to see what BLUELOCK does in order to develop him as a character, and doing this at lightning speed. This isn't a story about friendship and the fun sport of football, but a story about clashing egos, the feeling of despair that comes with losing, and the feeling of euphoria that comes with winning. What happens when you put an unremarkable person in a situation that's designed to mercilessly put him against all odds? In my opinion, there's only 2 things that can happen. Either they're utterly crushed by the pressure of said situation, or they are forced to rise to the occasion in order to beat those odds. Playing as a team didn't work for Isagi in the past, so as the story progresses, even though physically weaker than most other characters, you start seeing Isagi's strong points as a player, mainly his football IQ. He slowly but surely starts seeing his teammates less as teammates and more as puzzle pieces to use to getting himself closer to opportunities of scoring himself. BLUELOCK is still a shonen anime at the end of the day, and in good shonen fashion, our characters have abilities, or rather strong attributes that define a player's playstyle. From agility, strength, speed, dexterity, everything can be a weapon for a player to use and get the better of their opponents. The great thing about Isagi's spatial awareness and later on metavision is the fact that even though he is inferior to other players overall, as someone who slowly becomes capable of analyzing in detail other players' strengths, weaknesses, to even predict the flow and future of the game itself, he can use his opponent's strengths against them. Which leads us to what I believe is the best concept in this anime, Devouring. Throughout BLUELOCK you'll hear this expression quite a bit. If Ego's, well, ego-based ideologies, speaks to a person's selfishness and self-importance as a striker, Devouring speaks to a person's ability to render their opponent's abilities useless. It's beating them at their own game, regardless if you're playing by their rules or not. Take Shoei BAROU as an example. He calls himself the king, arrogant, selfish. He sees himself above everyone else, obsessed with pursuing his own form of football, where he's the main character and everyone else falls to second thought. And as perhaps the most naturally physically gifted player in BLUELOCK, you can see where this overconfidence comes from. And yet, Isagi demolishes his playstyle multiple times throughout the anime and manga. And this is no matter the scenario. They're in opposite teams and BAROU focuses too much on their opponents and the ball. Isagi learns to use his blind spot to evade them. They play in the same team and BAROU wants to play by himself even against two players. Then Isagi predicts the placement of the off ball from that exchange in order to score. Most characters in BLUELOCK, just like Isagi, tend to evolve as players, and BAROU is no different. You see, there's this point in the anime where they're playing teams of 3. As I just mentioned, BAROU is not a team player, which forces Isagi and Nagi to learn to play around BAROU's playstyle. And as the game progresses, BAROU slowly realizes how powerless he truly is, having been used and manipulated again and again by Isagi, with these two characters' roles having been fully reversed. BAROU is devoured by Isagi. He passes to him, something the self-proclaimed king of the field would never allow himself to do. This is what makes a character like Isagi so good. He knows the gap between himself and other players. He is, like his design suggests, unremarkable. He constantly doubts himself and his ability to surpass these geniuses. And yet he finds ways to do so, turning himself remarkable. By becoming the center of BLUELOCK, his existence and constant egocentric desire to become the best striker forces those already pretty incredible players to reinvent themselves, creating a vicious cycle of constant devouring. Even BAROU, right after this scene I just mentioned, he has a mental breakdown and refusing to play secondary character like Isagi, he evolves. Instead of brutally trying to pass through other players like he used to, he develops his own style of dribbling on the spot, consequently unlocking himself from the shackles that Isagi had created. If BLUELOCK is a chaotic environment where the biggest ego rules overall, then Yoichi Isagi, someone who constantly beats the odds against monstrously gifted players, is the embodiment of that word, ego. By this point in the story, there's already been many occasions where Isagi has proven himself to be more than an unpolished gem, shown his ego to be superior to other characters. But nothing compares to this scene in the manga. For some context, at a later point in the story, Ego has to justify BLUELOCK's existence and effectiveness in order to continue the program, and so he makes a deal with the higher-ups. BLUELOCK versus the U20 Japanese team. These unpolished gems versus professional players. And it is a fierce game, one of my favorite in the whole manga, and after many backs and forths, the game's at a still point. And having been playing a mostly supportive role the entire game, right under everyone's noses, Isagi steals the ball and scores the winning goal for BLUELOCK. The celebration is heartfelt, the crowd goes wild, and so to the scoring the decisive goal, Isagi is then asked for an after-game interview, and you see how much he has changed in this scene. From low number 299 to the ace of BLUELOCK.
こちら来ていただきました。劇的継承ゴールのブルーロック入れ歯、伊崎陽一選手です。ゲームを終えて率直な感想をお聞かせください。まあ、めちゃめちゃ嬉しいです。はい。今日の活躍でアンダー20だよ。犬も見えてきましたが、今後に向けて意気込みはありますか？
今後、意気込み、俺の、します。
俺たちはアンダー20ワールドカップで優勝します。俺たち、いや、違うな。俺が日本をアンダー20ワールドカップで優勝させます。
This is how BLUELOCK turns Yoichi Isagi into the protagonist. Thank you so much for watching. I apologize for taking so long to post again, but better late than never. I'd like to give a special thanks to D. Vittoria for translating the Japanese from the original manga. I hope my voice acting wasn't too bad, and of course, thank you all for over 100 views on my first video. It means a lot to me, believe me. I'll try and post at the very least once a month, so please subscribe, look forward to the next video, and I hope you take care of yourselves. Bye bye!